Samantha Hayes had perfected the art of appearing successful. Her mornings began before sunrise, not with calm or coffee, but with frantic tapping on a laptop and back-to-back Zoom meetings. At only 32, she was already the youngest senior marketing executive at her firm, admired and envied in equal measure. Her sleek Manhattan apartment was filled with minimalist decor, untouched yoga mats, and unopened self-help books. She wore ambition like perfume, bold, undeniable, and occasionally suffocating. Every moment of her life was documented, curated, and uploaded. Instagram knew more about her than her own mother. Friends called her unstoppable, but none noticed how tired she looked when the filters came off. Deep down, Samantha wasn't running towards something, she was running from something. A quiet, gnawing emptiness had taken root, one that no title, no paycheck, no social validation could fill. Yet, she kept moving. She skipped birthdays, avoided calls from her younger sister, and declined her dad's weekend invitations with polite, pre-written texts. She had convinced herself that success required sacrifice, but she didn't know she was sacrificing herself. Her therapist had once asked, "When was the last time you felt joy, not pride, not relief, but real, soulful joy?" Samantha had smiled and replied, "I don't really have time for that." That answer haunted her more than she'd admit. The truth was, despite her flawless facade, she couldn't remember the last time she truly laughed. Her life was a blur of deadlines, high heels, and late-night caffeine. Even her dreams were filled with checklists. People admired her pace, but no one questioned where she was going, or why she never stopped. That was, until one rainy Tuesday, when everything she thought she had control over began to unravel. Her taxi broke down, her meetings got cancelled, and for the first time in years, she had nowhere to be. That unexpected pause would become the doorway to the most profound chapter of her life. But at that moment, soaked in stress and rain, standing near Central Park with no signal and no direction, Samantha was still chasing, though she was about to learn, in the most unexpected way, that some of life's greatest turning points come not when we speed up, but when we're finally forced to stop. Samantha stood by the edge of Central Park, frustrated and drenched, her phone useless in the downpour. For the first time in years, she was without direction. Her perfectly mapped day had unraveled, and the silence pressed in around her like an unfamiliar weight. With nowhere to go and no signal to call a car, she wandered deeper into the park, heels clicking against the wet pavement until she spotted an old wooden bench under a large oak tree. On that bench sat a man, elderly, with snow-white hair, a threadbare coat, and a worn paper bag beside him. He was tossing breadcrumbs to pigeons, utterly unfazed by the rain. Something about his calm struck her, so she sat, sighing loudly to signal she didn't want to talk. But he didn't flinch. Instead, after a quiet moment, he turned to her and said, "Funny how life forces us to slow down when we've forgotten how." She gave a polite smile, then looked away, annoyed but curious. "You look like someone who's always late," he added gently. "But never really arriving anywhere." That hit deeper than she expected. "Do you always talk to strangers?" she asked. He chuckled. "Only the ones who are too busy to hear themselves think." For a moment, neither spoke. Rain danced softly on the leaves above them. He offered her a slice of bread to toss to the birds. Reluctantly, she took it, and watched as a small bird landed nearby. Something in that simple gesture, a bird trusting her hand, unlocked a stillness she hadn't felt in years. "I'm Arthur," he said, not expecting her name in return. She gave it anyway. "Samantha." They sat in silence, feeding birds together as if it had always been part of her day. In that stillness, something shifted. The bench, the birds, the rain, it all slowed her racing mind. It was just 15 minutes, but they felt infinite. When she finally rose to leave, she paused. "Do you come here often?" Arthur smiled, eyes kind. "Every day. This is where I remember what matters." She nodded, unsure why she felt compelled to return. But as she walked away, she glanced back. Arthur was still there, still feeding the birds, like a statue etched with quiet wisdom. For the first time in forever, Samantha didn't feel in a rush. Samantha returned to the bench the next day. She told herself it was just a shortcut, but deep down, she hoped Arthur would be there. He was. Same coat, same paper bag of breadcrumbs, same patient gaze. This time, she sat without hesitation. "Busy day?" he asked with a smirk. She exhaled, letting her shoulders relax. "Always." What began as chance visits soon became habit. Every morning before work, or after a rough day, she found herself drawn to that bench, to Arthur's steady presence. He never pried, never judged. He simply talked, about life, about people, about the things we forget while chasing the things we think we need. "I used to be like you," he said one morning, tossing crumbs with a practiced hand. "Built a business from nothing. First one in, last one out. Missed my son's piano recital for a meeting I don't even remember now." His voice cracked slightly. "My wife asked me once, 'When are you going to live the life you're working so hard for?' I didn't have an answer." Samantha listened intently, something inside her unraveling. Arthur's words weren't dramatic, but they landed like truth she'd been too busy to hear. He told her how, after a heart attack at 58, he sold his company, gave away most of his possessions, and started walking through the park each morning just to feel the air on his face. "The birds don't care who you were," he chuckled. "They just know if you're kind." For the first time, Samantha shared about her mother's distant voice on the phone, her sister's disappointed silence, the weight of constantly needing to be enough. Arthur just nodded. "You're not alone in that," he said. "The world's filled with people chasing approval like it's love. But love, it never makes you run so hard." That line stuck with her for days. She found herself canceling meetings that didn't matter, calling her sister, turning off her phone for a walk in the evening. Arthur never asked her to change, he simply reminded her what was worth remembering. And when she confessed she was afraid of slowing down, he smiled and said, "Sometimes stopping isn't the end, it's the start of everything real." And in that quiet park, on that weathered bench, Samantha began to rediscover her life, not in grand gestures, but in moments finally noticed. One crisp morning, Samantha arrived at the bench, coffee in hand, expecting to see Arthur's familiar figure already tossing breadcrumbs to the birds. But the bench was empty. She waited for an hour. Then 2. The birds fluttered nearby, as if confused by his absence. For the next 3 days, she returned at the same time, hoping, praying, he'd appear, smiling like always. But he never came. On the 4th day, she found a folded note tucked carefully under the bench, weighted down by a small, smooth stone. It was in Arthur's handwriting. "Dear Samantha, if you're reading this, I've moved on, perhaps not just from this bench, but from this world. My heart has been failing for some time, but our conversations gave me more life than any medicine. Thank you for letting me sit with you. You reminded me why I stayed alive as long as I did. Don't run anymore. Live. Really live. The race was never real." Her hands trembled as she clutched the note, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. It felt like losing a lighthouse in a storm. But even in his absence, Arthur had left her with direction. That very week, Samantha made the kind of decisions she once thought impossible. She turned down a promotion that would have tied her to endless hours and accepted a smaller role that allowed her time to breathe. She booked a trip home to visit her mother, brought flowers to her sister, and apologized, not with words, but with time. She started a blog titled The Bench Lessons, where she shared stories and wisdom Arthur had passed to her, and surprisingly, thousands began to read and resonate. People from all over sent in stories of the strangers who'd stopped their chaos, even briefly, to change their lives. Samantha's world slowed, but it didn't shrink, it deepened. Her smile became less about performance and more about peace. And every Sunday, she returned to that old wooden bench, feeding the birds alone, sometimes sharing breadcrumbs with passers-by who looked lost in their own races. She would always remember Arthur, not for the things he said, but for the silence he helped her hear. In a world addicted to motion, one stranger had taught her the sacred power of stillness. And that changed everything.